Hello all. This is Keith Fuller presenting another production/leadership IGDA webinar on Wednesday. I would desperately like to believe that all of our technical issues have been taken care of here and that everybody can hear me. We have questions that you can ask while we're doing our chat with Mike Acton here. We've got a chat window, we've got questions. I can selectively enable people's microphones, so all sorts of things are available to us. This is very much geared towards your participation, your interaction. We've got Mike here from Insomniac Games, and I'll give you a little bit of background before I let him start talking. My background with Mike is, when did it start? It goes back, boy, maybe 3 years or so, 4 years ago even, when I saw this fabulous blog post that Mike put up on the Insomniac blog entitled, "It Doesn't Have to Suck." And the gist of the blog post was, yes, there are difficulties with games production, especially large teams, large budgets, these sorts of things. But as many difficulties as we have in shipping games on time, treating employees well, pursuing professional development, and the emotional and physical well-being of our developers, there are still ways to do all of these things without having these personnel aspects fall by the wayside. Right? We can make games and value our employees at the same time. So that was really what drew me to first connect with Mike and to talk with him about what's important to him, his history in leading teams, how he goes about promoting the professional development of his team members. And so he and I have been working together on various little side projects and whatnot since then. We've kept in close contact, and as a result, I have learned a lot from Mike. I have learned a lot about aspects of leading teams, but more importantly, pursuing, kind of pushing the development of the people for whom you're responsible as a leader. And that's, in a nutshell, I think that is one of the greatest strengths that Mike brings to the table as a leader, and that is one of the main reasons that I wanted to get him on board to do one of these webinars. To have him be able to answer your questions about, hey, what's it like leading a tech team, especially at a large game studio like Insomniac. So that having been said, I'm going to turn this over to Mike. I'll still be here as moderator, and I encourage everybody at all points in time, raise your hand if you have questions. There's a little icon you've got for that. Enter questions, and I will do my best to make sure that those are getting answered, getting addressed. That having been said, we are recording this for posterity's sake, and in the not too distant future, we hope to make this and all the other webinar recordings available through the IGDA. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and thank you, Mike, for taking the time out of your schedule to do a little Q&A with us. So that having been said, take it away, Mike.
Well, thanks, Keith. So, like Keith said, I'd like this to be as interactive as possible so that I can answer questions or at least talk about the things that you're most interested in. But I will start out with something that Keith said to me. So this is a Keith Fuller quote. People that don't believe they are led well aren't led well. And I think that is crucial. I think that it says a lot of things, and most importantly, it says that you can ask people if they think they're being led well, if they think that their lead is good. And that, unlike many other things in life, makes things a lot easier when you can actually get this information, right? When you can ask the people that are on your team, do you think you're doing a good job? Or indirectly, you can get somebody else to ask that question for you. And get an answer that approximates the truth, or at least conversely, if they say they aren't, you know that you're not doing a good job. That's a super helpful piece of information to start with. So as a lead, I think the easiest place to start is asking people, you know, what do you think is, what do you think a good lead does? What do you think a good lead shouldn't do? And what do you think that I'm doing, either part of that or that I shouldn't be doing? So that's, I think, an excellent place to start as a lead. If you're asking yourself, so where do I begin? You know, if I'm a fresh lead, where do I begin? What do I think are good, you know, qualities of a leader, especially in the game dev industry? I think that there are a few things that I consider really important. One is that you are actively moving the industry forward, and I think that can be in any number of things, right? Especially looking at more recent events, inclusion and people moving. We see a lot of leaders emerge, right, in these issues of inclusion, especially on issues of sexism, and so we're seeing leaders emerge in the game industry because they are helping to move the industry forward, because they take the industry seriously and they take the issues in the industry seriously. Another quality I think I find crucial in a leader is that they serve those who work with and for them. Meaning, as Keith said, that you help other people to grow. And I think that is probably the most important thing that you can do as a lead, is to sort of look around you and say, how can I help lift up the people around me? And that may be often technical if you're on a technical team, you know, working with a skill set and helping to improve that. But it may be in other ways. It may be helping teams to communicate, helping individuals or teams to communicate with each other, learning those skills. It may be simply giving them, you know, a regimen of practice. So like a coach, right? You know, you need it, even in the very best teams, right? If they don't practice a skill, they certainly aren't. They certainly aren't going to be as good at it overall. So setting up that regimen of practice so that, you know, when the time comes, for example, optimizing if you're on a technical programming team, when the time comes to do that sort of hardcore low-level optimization, if they haven't practiced it, if they haven't had the opportunity to continuously practice that, then they simply aren't going to be ready when it's necessary. So another quality I find is important, or I believe is important, and is treating game devs, or people, but game devs in particular, like adults. And as simple as that sounds, we find overall that it's uncommon. What we see a lot in the industry as people grow into a leadership or management roles is that they stop treating their fellow game devs as adults. In particular, they look for reasons why, you know, how to force them to do something, how to control them. You know, why aren't they doing what I tell them to do? Like they speak of them as though they would speak of small children. As they speak of them as though they would speak of small children who are not very bright. And that's both unnerving and poses a lot of, you know, ethical and moral problems, right? And it's, you know, more fundamentally, it's ineffective. You know, if you are driven by effectiveness and whether or not this is, you know, how you're going to improve your team, certainly starting by treating them as capable, professional, adult people is a good place to start. Another quality I find crucial in a leader is the understanding, fundamental understanding that leadership magnifies. Bad leadership, doing this job poorly, you know, whether or not it's as a lead, as a professional lead, right, manager, or as an individual who has decided to lead others, whether or not that's, you know, a job, bad leadership can make everything around them much, much worse, right? More so, really, than anything else. Virtually every ill that we talk about when we talk about the game industry in general, when we talk about closed studios and crunch time and poor working conditions, when we talk about all those things, when we talk about the diversity gap, all these issues that we talked about are all due to poor leadership, full stop. All the biggest problems that we deal with. On the flip side of that, good leadership can make everything better, can make everyone around them better, can improve the whole condition better than any individual can. And so, the very idea that leadership magnifies is, I think, a lot of responsibility to take on. And the idea, you have to internalize that. I think in the leader, you have to internalize and accept that you have this responsibility and take it very seriously. So I have some questions that were presented to me earlier and that I'd like to give some answers to as best I can before I get to whatever questions that you might have. So the first question I got was, I'm curious about how you developed your leadership skill after you were first promoted into a leadership role. And I think that a lot of people have this problem, right? They do a job really well, and there's a gap in leadership, and it's apparent that there's a gap in leadership on their team, in the studio, whatever. And so they are then promoted into this role of lead, partially because they did a technical job very well. It's not uncommon. It's not a problem per se either. And it's not specific to the game industry, right? That's general, often how things are done, broadly. So when a person is put into this role, they don't know what to do, right? And often they're not given any kind of training, and so they have to figure it out. And they look around them, to other leads, probably in their studio. They may or may not reach out beyond that. And they have what are inevitably poor role models, right? Other people who have learned in the same way without any guidance, and then they reflect those lessons, right? They don't treat game devs like adults. They aren't focused on moving the industry forward. They aren't serving those that they work with and helping people to grow. And they don't realize how much their poor leadership magnifies and makes everything much worse, right? So how to get started is an incredibly important question. And I think that for me personally, the question is sort of how I develop my own personal skill set. And I think for me it's because I enjoy it, right? And I think that it's a matter of perspective. I see leadership, I see teams, working with teams, especially larger teams in a console space, which is the space that I enjoy, as a system. And coming from an engine programming background, and coming from a programming background more generally, systems and working with them and solving problems in that space is something that I enjoy doing. And seeing these spaces as related and much more deeply related than somebody might think helped me bridge that gap. And seeing it as not something very different, but a system with lots of variables that change constantly, this massive complicated problem that doesn't lend itself to simple models, which is very much, I think, like game development in general and building things for game development. And working with engines, it's sort of just a much more complicated version. It's one of the reasons I like console development, for instance, is that the world is sort of shifted out from under you every so often, and you completely start over, and you have to be able to adapt very quickly. And working with a team and leading a team is very much like that, except we're on a daily basis instead of every 5-year basis. Everything sort of shifts out from under you, and you have to adapt very quickly. You have to look at all those variables and figure out what is going on with the system and how you can be most effective and efficient. And seeing those things as sort of interrelated in my head, my sort of the mental model of the world, helped me bridge that gap. And I view them as very different things. And so that helped me figure out how, what things that I already knew that I could apply directly to leadership and management when I first started. Not to mention sort of looking out there in the world and saying, okay, what's the best research that's out there, but not taking anything at face value, because it's really clear that in the sort of management leadership space, in that area of the kind of books that you would find and the suggestions that you would find, most of that is garbage, right? There's a lot of fads, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make any kind of sense, and so, reading that and researching that with a very critical eye, I think is important too.
Hey, Mike, can I jump in a sec? Keith here.
Yes.
So, two points that would be of interest to me and that I think would be of interest to other folks. Looking at the timeline of your career, could you talk about, so probably for starters, this would be a good point, even though we're sort of working backwards. Talk about what your role looks like today. So main responsibilities, number of people who directly report to you, that sort of thing. So that's a point. And then the other point in your career would be, so what was your first leadership role like? What was the team size? What was the project size? Those sorts of things, so we can kind of compare, contrast what those experiences were like for you.
Okay, so right now I am the engine director at Insomnia Games, and that's a team of about 20 people. The team is then further divided into groups of between 3 and 5 people, so 4 groups. And each one of those groups then has a lead. So that's sort of my current setup, right? My current process is working with not just a small group of game developers, but also with leads in that space and helping to develop them as much as possible, and sharing my experience hopefully with them, and helping them to help the rest of the team as well. So my focus is generally on that. On the team as a whole, sort of figuring out how we can grow as a team, what we need to focus on, along with the day-to-day stuff, the technical work of sort of setting direction and figuring out what we're doing technically, what problems we are solving. But both helping the leads to grow as leads and everyone on the team to grow as engine programmers is the day-to-day work. As far as sort of rewinding back to my first leadership role, I mean, I can certainly point to the problem times, right, the old days. Sort of looking back when I was at Sony, I was promoted to a lead programmer on PS1 project, and that promotion happened largely due to attrition. I was the last one left who was there the longest.
I shouldn't laugh, I'm sorry.
So, which, in certain spaces, in some places, that is how it's done, right? Or that is at least not surprising. And I think you can tell by Keith's laugh, not at all surprising. Now, I'm sure it's a very different place now, and in fact, that's the exact studio doesn't exist anymore. But that's how it went down. And that was, I was totally ill-prepared for that role. And there was a lot of other things going on, and it really, I think, really went poorly overall. And I think, again, to speak to experience, I sort of looking around me at the time, there was not a lot of good leadership, good leadership examples that I could point to or look at or see. And so the whole this, what would happen is sort of, as I said, you would copy consciously or unconsciously how things were done around you by other leads. And that didn't go well. Not for me, not for the team, not for anybody, I think. And sort of fast forwarding to the middle, before I came to Insomniac, I was at High Moon, and I had a very small team working on research. And I think that really was the point at which, beyond sort of finding out how not to lead, right? Sort of up to then many years of experience, sort of looking at other people, the teams around me, and sort of discovering all these ways that things could go wrong, and these are all things that I did not like, and sort of internalizing those. I think this was one point where I learned, with a very small team, how things could go well, and really focusing on, I think accidentally, focusing on their growth and focusing on how can we make you better and train you, and get things going as quickly as possible, and continuously, and just keep doing it and doing it. And I think seeing the benefit of that really was what sort of turned on the light for me as a lead, and made it clear that was a crucial part of my personal sort of view of leadership. And then at Insomniac, working with a much larger team, and then just sort of developing that continuously over the many years now working at Insomniac. And keeping I've kept this running list, this running notes of how, what I'm doing and what questions I'm asking. And you should be surprised at how much notes you can build up over the course of many years. And just sort of continuously going through that and reevaluating all the things that I've tried and learned and experimented with. And that brings us to today.
Hey, I'm just going to completely abscond with things because I can. Let me ask you this. So you mentioned Mike, your first leadership role was largely, hey, Mike's still here, let's put him in charge, which has echoes of my own experience, is why I laugh. From there to today, you have said, yes, by and large, there are few experiences available to leaders in game development where they can look around and say, oh, there's a good example. There's somebody who's doing things well, right? So those are rare, but surely there are folks that you do look up to. Surely there are folks that your company, elsewhere in the industry, maybe other industries, that you would point to them and say, hey, what I've seen of that person is something that's worth emulating. That's something that I have learned from. What are the good examples, Mike?
That's a really hard question, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Stump Mike Acton Day here on the IGDA webinars. Is anyone really this? Can I point to and say this is sort of a great example? I don't know. Certainly, not to make this a sort of mutual admiration society. Certainly, I can point to you, Keith, and say, you have inspired me in many ways as far as your consciousness of leadership and the importance of it, and reevaluating it, and speaking about it, and doing things about it, going out into the industry, and that's been inspiring. And so you have, in particular, this list that you have been developing of people who meet these criteria that you find, of which I am proud to be a member of this list. So that that kind of thing is what I would point to, and sort of the individual bits of that, finding these not whole things that maybe I can point to and say, this is one person who embodies everything I think is valuable in in a leader or a human being, but looking at individuals and saying this is something that I can learn from. This is somebody who's doing something right. And I think there are a lot of people who meet that criteria, right? And I think especially looking at social media now, and looking over the last, say, 5 years, I've met so many more people who demonstrate sort of individual qualities of leadership online that I wouldn't have had examples of before.
And that's amazing, right? Just every day I can go online and see people who are leading the charge in many areas, whether that is in, as I said, most importantly recently in the areas of inclusion and sexism, right, in the industry. We've seen many people emerge with really strong leadership qualities. So if you're looking for a list of individual people, I guess I would have to open up my LinkedIn and start walking through it. But lots more people now, right? Or at least I'm aware, I think, of a lot more people.
Okay. Well, now, as soon as I grabbed the mic, of course, three other questions popped up on the list from some folks here. So I'm going to get to John Veneron, who said, question from the HMX team. How have you been able to use your leadership position to move industry issues forward? You mentioned sexism as an example.
Right. So I don't know how much of the ball I can move forward. Right. That's tough, but I think it's important that I at least try. So I don't know how much I can move the industry forward. But there are things that are personally important to me. I mean, I would personally consider myself a feminist, and I believe in equality overall. And I will certainly make noise about those issues as much as is reasonable to do so. You know, when there is an opportunity to do so. And taking sort of the opportunity in this talk today, right? To point out that I believe that this is an issue, and I believe that these issues are important. I think by itself is at least something, right? On the technical side, I think that there are a lot of things that I also find important. Viewpoints, approaches to solving problems, how we develop code and solve problems as engineers. Focusing on the data, for instance, is sort of a crucial point of view for me. Fundamental to how I solve problems, and taking every opportunity to sort of espouse those ideas and to get out there and share them. So I think that really, what I mean is taking whatever opportunities you can to see how much you can help, whatever those causes are that are important to you. There are small ways to do that online and social media now, and sort of pushing and promoting those issues that are important to you. But also the traditional approaches, so speaking at GDC and other conferences like that. So I think it's just a constant burn, right? It's over the years finding as many opportunities as you can to move and to move the ball forward, and certainly not let it roll back, right? So how as far as how have I done it, right? That's I think been my focus, is finding those opportunities to speak and share my mind, on both the individual level and in the sort of traditional conference level, and yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Excellent, excellent. We've got a few more queuing up here from Floris de Gruyter. I'm going to ruin some people's names. I apologize in advance. As a leader, one of your roles is to shield, to a degree, your team from higher management. How do you deal with not agreeing with higher management decisions, yet having to communicate that to your team? Obviously, you don't want to speak bad about your management, but you want to make sure that you're on the team's side as well.
So I have a little bit of trouble conceptually with this idea that's gone around for a long time now, that the job of a manager is this sort of shit shield or shit umbrella, and it implies, the whole thing implies this sort of completely unworkable situation, right? That you're in this bad situation to begin with. If you are all in this shit storm where you need shit umbrellas and shit shields, maybe the situation has bigger problems than how to best, what the best umbrella is to get. So this is not really a question that I, ask myself, I guess. The question is, if I don't agree with upper management, or I don't agree with the publisher for some reason, that's where I start, right? Why, why not? Why don't I agree? What is it? How can we get on the same page? Because I think us getting on the same page first is the most important thing. Because I think if you start with the premise that you don't agree and that you're just hiding that fact, then that will always show in what you do, and that will just build up, right? Even if you don't say it, it will show in what you do, and things will be worse off for it. So figuring out how you can get on the same page is the place to start, right? You may not have all the information. You may not know what is going on and why the decision was made. So trying to find a place of agreement so that you can present that position better, and you can believe in it better. Now, certainly, I will admit to being in a much, in a lucky position, I guess, where my values and the values of the people around me tend to match up, right? The values of, the owners of Insomniac tend to match up, and the things that are important, we find, I think, that the things that are important to us are shared. And, not every situation can be like that. But you can, I think, always find some point of agreement, some reason why this, you can defend this position. And then that's what I think you bring to your team. You say, this is why this is a good idea. This is why this is important. And you never blame, right? I think that's a place to start. I see a lot of people, well, we're doing this because we have to. We're doing this because, management says so, and I'm just going to keep you guys away from that kind of stuff. There's stuff to keep people away from. There's unnecessary things that happen, right, in teams, and just a lot of busy noise that you can keep from your teams because it's not productive or helpful. But the direction and the important stuff is not one of those things you protect the team from. I think they should be aware of that. They should be aware of what's going on. And when teams, announce that a studio is closing and it was a surprise to everyone, it's largely because the series of people were all protecting each other from what was essentially the most important news that anyone could hear, right? The most important facts, and the sort of series of people protecting each other, nobody could do anything about it. Nobody could help. So that's my answer.
Excellent. Excellent. We've got another one queued up here from Brian Jury, who asks, what are your experiences working with production staff who may not have a technical background? And do you have any suggestions for how a non-technical producer should lead a tech team?
Sure. I have non-technical people on the engine team, and some of those in the past have then grown into a project management type role. So I believe I do have some experience with this particular exact question. And I think that, again, it starts with treating people like professional adults and not like children, and certainly, looking into the technical space, and then when we're talking about, engine development, is 90% of those discussions are very technical. And it's sort of like helping them understand and put into perspective the things that you're talking about. And they don't have to know everything, right? But they need to know broadly what the impact of what you're talking about is and what problems you're trying to solve. And I think that by itself makes everything much easier. Rather than talking about in principle, talking about tasks and talking about how something is done. When the team is talking, the team should be talking about what problems they're solving. That perspective is a lot easier to grasp, and it's also a lot more effective. So these are the problems that we're trying to solve, and these are the sub-problems of those problems. And that's something that somebody can participate in, because if you're just talking about how do I implement this, nobody can jump into that, right? Nobody can help unless they also understand that space. But if you say, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, I'm trying to make this easier, faster, better, whatever, then there might be other places that somebody even non-technical can jump in and help. They know that, you know, your goal is to make this faster. Okay, maybe this process faster. Okay, you're approaching this from a technical implementation point of view, but maybe I can also approach it from a different angle. You know, how I can help gather information, how many people are doing this process, how long is it taking, what, you know, are there ways to short circuit it before it even gets to this point? And so even and I don't want to say even, non-technical people also can participate in this problem solving through non-technical means. And so starting with the problem, always starting with the problem and never with the solution, and always continuing to talk about the problem and not the implementation specifics, I think is the way to include everybody. And even just generally, without including, you know, this additional value of including everybody, it helps you to solve the problems in general if you always continuously reminding yourself of what problem you're actually trying to solve. Otherwise, you get lost in the implementation, you get lost in the tasks, you get lost in the details, and you see that as the goal, right? My goal is to check off these tasks, and that's never true. Your goal is to always solve some problem, and if you lose sight of that, then things start sliding downhill. Yep.
Excellent, excellent. We've got another question popped up from Oliver Famsky. What specific leadership techniques do you suggest to leads when starting out in the new role? So, you know, hearkening back, I'll just kind of put my own spin on that, hearkening back to when you were put in that first position way back when, through attrition, as you said. If present-day Mike could go back to then Mike, what would you share, right? What would you say, hey, this is what you should be doing as a leader?
Okay. So, yes, it's a very long list of things I think that somebody should do. So specifically, things that I think are important. One-on-ones are important. So finding the opportunity to sit down with everyone on your team as often as is workable for you guys, and that would be, I think, no less than once every 2 weeks, but certainly could be more. So once a week, I think would be ideal, and I certainly would love to be able to do once a week with everybody on the team. And in those one-on-ones, I think it's important to know what they are and what they aren't, and what the value is and what it isn't. It's not about the job, right, in the practical sense. It's not about looking at the tasks. It's not about talking about what somebody's doing now, although that may come up in context. And I think I understand that a lot of people use it like that. And you have the rest of every single day of the job to talk about what you're doing every single day of the job. This time is about the bigger issues, right? It's about whether or not they are whether or not they are satisfied. It's about whether or not they are growing. It's about how they're growing. It's about understanding what those individuals value, and it's about them understanding what you value. It's about understanding what makes them uncomfortable, and what they're good at, what their vision for the future is, and what your vision of the future is, right? And it's about sort of sharing that level of information, working on their career, and them trusting and knowing that that's what you're working on and what you're helping with. So starting with that, one-on-ones is important. I think having a constant checkpoint is good. So for instance, I have a weekly meeting with the whole team where this is a point to reinforce the direction, reinforce the things I think that are important for the team. Yes, there are notice type elements to this. This is what is going on. But largely, it's about having this checkpoint and this place where we can reinforce the important things. And in that meeting, I also have what I call weekly exercises, which is a reason and excuse for the team to work together on something that's not their daily work. And I find that technique useful and valuable. Let's see what else is valuable. Reminding people that the value is not in the code that they write. I think this is something that that specifically with newly minted team leads is often a problem, but also with everybody on the team. That a lot of programmers in particular feel that their value, either again consciously or unconsciously, is in this sort of code. They feel valuable writing code, but that's not it, right? That's not the job, and that's not where their value is. Their value is in solving problems, right? As human beings and as a part of the team. So constantly, again, reinforcing what problem are we solving, and is there a better way to solve it? And I don't care if you're writing code to solve it, right? We're solving, that happens to be one tool you can wield. But there are other tools. If you can solve the same problem by walking over and talking to somebody rather than writing a piece of code, it's a win, right? So let's not worry about writing code. As a lead, sort of concentrating on what problems you can solve as a team, rather than as an individual. I think a lot of people, when they're making that transition, have always internalized their value as an individual, right? This is how much I can give to the team. This is how much I can do, and they've seen their value in that way, and other people have seen their value in that way. This is that's often why people become leads, because they, as an individual, have contributed so much. But as soon as you've made that transition, that's no longer your value, right? It's not how much you can contribute as an individual. It's how much you can get your team to grow, and how much they can contribute as a team. And that delta, right? How much better off the whole team is, and how much bigger and better problems the whole team can solve now that you are there. That's your measure. So switching that in your head, and not worrying so much about your individual contribution as, say, a programmer, is important. I think, as far as in things that you can do, sort of common mistakes that you might do as a new lead, I think right at the top of the list would be not delegating, trying to still take on too much of that individual contributor role. And for some people, this process takes years to get over, and let go of, and really focus on delegating these problems out to people, and letting them solve them. And I think that partially comes down to trust, right? You have to trust the team, and you have to demonstrate that trust by giving them those problems to solve that you don't know how to solve, right? Here's the problem. You present the problem, you present the constraints, and you trust that they will solve it. And they can come to you and you can work together on solving it, but fundamentally they know that that's their responsibility to solve it, and you're not doing it, right? So that delegation, I think, is probably at the top of the list. So another thing I think you could do right up front is figure out what your expectations are. So not setting clear enough expectations, I think, is a common mistake, right? So what do you expect from the team? What are the things that are important to you? What would frustrate you if it's not there? And sort of writing those out. And those things change over time, right? As you grow, as the team grows, as you all grow together, those things change over time. You don't have to make the list to end all lists. Start with some things that are important to you, and whether those are technical things. I expect I expect everyone on the team to be able to know and do this, whatever that technical skill is, or ways of communicating, or whatever is important to you, and then you present that to the team, right, in clear, no-nonsense words, that there is no way that you can mistake what I mean by this. And often, there's going to be conflict with those things, and people are going to be uncomfortable, at least initially, with that whole idea that you're setting clear expectations. It's unusual in a lot of scenarios. But you keep doing it, and you hold yourself and you hold the team to it. And those people who don't want to meet those expectations, for whatever reason, aren't a match for the team, and then you help them find another path. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think another common problem in sort of that initial lead, and even for people who've been doing it for many years, is not raising the bar far or fast enough. And you want to continuously be ratcheting things up year after year. What do you expect? What is the team? What do you expect from the team? What do you expect from the very best on your team? That bar gets raised. and people have to meet it, right? Everyone on the team has to meet whatever that bar is that you've set as a team between, among you and your leads, among, you as a whole team, sort of looking at you as a culture. And sometimes, again, people won't, for whatever reason, want to meet that bar, and helping them find another path is part of the work. You don't not raise the bar because someone won't meet the bar if you raise it. That's not a good reason not to raise the bar. You have to continue to challenge people, and being willing to challenge people and challenge the team in a good way, even though that may mean that someone decides that that's not the path for them, is a hard choice, but making hard choices is the job. I think with a lot of new leads, they feel unqualified to take on certain responsibilities, and sometimes they simply are unqualified, but it's this feeling, this overall feeling that they don't know what to do or how to do it, so they're not going to do it. They're going to shy away from it. And I think that's the thing that it causes the problem. I mean, you've taken on the responsibility. In this scenario, you've accepted the leadership position. So unqualified or not, you have to do your very best, and you can't shy away from the things that make you uncomfortable. In fact, you have to figure out what makes you uncomfortable first and run toward those things as quickly as possible, because those are the things that are going to cost you the most trouble over the long term. So every single day, that's the thing you want to focus on is the thing that makes you most uncomfortable. I would also think another common issue is not taking the time to think about leadership issues in general. So the meta discussion, this discussion, for instance, that we're talking about, how to be a good lead, not taking the time to do this. It's a real job, right? It's real work, and it's a real area that you need to study and to think about critically, and to incorporate into your sort of mental model of how the world works and how you work, and to spend real time studying that. You've probably you've studied hundreds of thousands of hours, probably, not really, tens of thousands of hours on whatever your technical skill is, and so you're not nearly that advanced on the leadership skill, very likely. So you're now behind. So you need to spend some real quality time focusing on these skills, and that means whatever that means. It means maybe taking part in these kinds of discussions and sitting down and starting with yourself and being able to articulate what you value, what's important to you, what makes you uncomfortable, articulate your vision for the future, and doing that sort of daily and spending real time, hours a day, perhaps, working on this until you've reached this point where what your approach is, at least. And so, yeah, that's how I would talk. Yeah, yes, I hope that answers the question.
Okay, well, let me jump in here, Mike, because I want to ask for a little bit of extrapolation on one of the points you hit on. So you talked about the importance of delegation, right? You're a lead. You have X number of programmers for whom you're responsible, and your tendency, especially as a newly appointed lead, is to still be a contributor as well as a leader. Now, certainly in an organization of hundreds of people, at which point you may be a lead of 5, 10, 15, 20 people, it's easily understood that there is whatever work you personally could be contributing to, you could delegate that to somebody, right? There are enough hands to go around. It becomes more of an issue of who's the best person. Are you personally, philosophically willing to do so? Those sorts of things. But if you scale that down to smaller teams, and largely I'm thinking of, so just beyond the startup phase, we don't have just 5 people in the company anymore. We don't have just 10 people maybe. But we're getting into 20, 30 people in the company. If you're the lead programmer, you maybe have 4 or 5, maybe 8 other engineers there. It may well be the case that there are not enough hands on keyboards to actually get everything done for the next milestone, the next deliverable, the next payment, right? Unless you, the lead, also contribute, right? There may be just an actual cap on, I can't delegate everything away or we won't get this deliverable done on time. Can you speak, what are your thoughts on a situation like that? What do you as the lead programmer do there?
Well, I think that's probably the most common scenario. I think most leads are individual contributors, and I don't think that is any kind of problem, really. I think that really is a difference in perspective. It's that ability to delegate. It's the ability to understand that your value is in what the team is doing as a whole, and not what your individual contribution is. So while you have to contribute, right, as part of the team, you still have to ensure, most importantly, that the whole team is contributing as well as they possibly can, and that they're growing, and that's really where your focus is, right? You are sort of first and foremost looking out at the rest of the team and saying, what is it that, how is it that everybody else can contribute? How can I help everybody else to grow? Start there. So in terms of, how you are sort of distributing that pie, right? You're taking your piece last is how it works. And, you're looking to say, what is it among the problems that we need to solve, what's the best problem for this person to solve? And the best problem may not be the problem that they are best at solving, and I think often the best problem is the one that they're not best at solving, right? You want to present things to people that will help them grow and learn, and it's often, I think, a mistake to give people the problems that they are best at solving are they're the best people to solve, right? They've always done it really well. They do it better than anybody else, so we'll always give them that same problem. It's not, in long term, it's often not best for them because they don't grow outside of that scope, and it's not the best for the team because nobody else is learning that same skill set. So helping people grow is an important part of the process. So you start there, right? That's, I think, the difference. That you still contribute, but you figure out, what's left to contribute. What after you've looked toward everybody else's growth and figured out what's best for them. And that's the thing. That's what you have to do. Sometimes that may be the things that you would normally have done. Given their choices, it's clear what everybody is going to do. But sometimes it might be something completely different, right? The thing that you've most personally associate with, let's say, if you're a lead engine programmer, you're most personally associate with, say, rendering. You may end up saying, well, it may be best to give this sort of bigger, important area to someone else where they can help them grow, and I can assist, but really, and I can help direct what's going on, but really it's about them growing, and you may end up doing something that's left over, right? Something else. So yeah, I think it's perfectly fine. You can be a contributor. It's normal. There's nothing at all wrong with that. But it's about what you think of first.
Excellent, excellent. Now, another question that occurs to me: a lot of people, a lot of folks would be aspiring game developers ask the questions about, well, what do I do to get hired, these sorts of things. I think there's plenty of material out there addressing those. Let me ask kind of the next step up that I don't hear getting asked a lot, but I think it's probably pretty important. It's certainly relevant to this discussion. You're the lead programmer. You have 20 people in front of you. What are you looking for when you think, hey, we're going to need another team lead? We're going to need somebody who's getting promoted into a leadership position next. What characteristics are you looking for?
So this kind of question, like, how do you know somebody can do the job when they've never done the job, right? That's really hard, and I don't have a great answer to that. It's like hiring, it's like I've looked to hire, and I have hired in the past, associate engine programs, those people who are just out of school or just starting out, and what you're looking for is potential, right? You're looking for the possibility that they will be very good in the future, and it's, looking for, potential and looking for a sort of high probability over somebody's career is very hard, right? You're trying to predict in 10 years, will this person be good at X? Well, 10 years is a long time, and a person's career, goes down many, paths. So anything can happen. But you do, there are, I think, individual qualities that you do look for, especially when you're sort of looking for, looking at potential leads. You look for somebody who can bridge that gap, right? Who can internalize this sort of problem structure, the new kinds of problems that they're facing, and approach it using the skills that they already have, that they know how to adapt in general to things like that. You're looking for somebody who can be self-critical, that can evaluate themselves in a rational and reasonable way. That when something isn't working, they can evaluate that, and they can figure out how to adapt and make those changes that are necessary. So those kind of qualities, I think, that always show themselves in some other ways, right? You can see that in people before they take on a management role or leadership role. So those are the kinds of signs that you can look for. And you can look for sort of these anti-signs as well. Are people, is somebody, very self-centered in a way that it would inhibit them from helping the rest of their team to grow first. And that would be problematic, right? If they can't look outward and put other people first. Are they very abrasive in a way that's going to inhibit them from working with the team, and both internally and outside the team? That's not to say there aren't abrasive leaders. I think the stereotype of a lead as we look out to the world is an abrasive person, right? But depending on your individual culture, you sort of have to make that decision. Is it enough? Is it too much? Is it going to work? Is it going to get in the way? But yeah, it's a subjective call, and you're right. Sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're wrong. But you take a chance again, because you find it's always going to start uncomfortably, right? It's always going to be outside of their skill set, and so I think if you're there to help, and you help them find their way, that's what's good about it, right? That's how you help. And you both, I think, recognize as a pair, hopefully, that sometimes it's not right? Sometimes it's not the right choice, and they may decide it's not the path for them. Fine, there's not the only path. There's plenty of ways you can contribute without being a lead. So it's not a great answer, and I don't have a great answer, to be honest.
What's a tough question? The people questions are always tough, especially, as you said, let's predict 10 years into the future. That's not the easiest thing. So we have maybe 90 seconds left. Are there any topics, anything you were hoping to share with folks, Mike, that maybe didn't get addressed here today? Anything that you think is a particularly critical aspect of talking about, from your position, technical leadership?
So I'll just reiterate some of the things that I think are important, and that you continuously look to grow the team, which means raising expectations, which means setting clear expectations, that for you and your team, that you reinforce that you are the end of the line, that when you see a problem in front of you, you pick it up. That's what you do. You pick up the problem. You don't put it off. You don't sort of just wait till somebody else can solve the problem. You pick it up, and then you take that on as a team, and you may choose to delegate it as a lead, but you're picking up problems as you find them. You, as a team, you're seeing things as problems to be solved, not as tasks. that you, as a lead, make sure that people are heard, and that is part of your one-on-ones at the very least. That you, as a lead, know and that you remind people that the job is what you make it, right? It's everyone's individual responsibility, their own career and their own growth, and all of that is their own responsibility. And you're just there to help, right? You're pushing as much as you can, but it has to come from them individually, and just like this job has to come from you as a lead. And be visible. I think this is part of that making a difference in the industry as well. If you're invisible, then nobody hears you. Nobody hears your voice, and you're not making that difference. You have to get over that uncomfortableness with being visible, and having people look to you and look at you when you're talking. And if you have to be able to speak publicly. Whether that means really like public speaking, or it means on social media, or it means just writing blogs or whatever external to the studio, right? But also internal to the studio, you have to be visible, and you have to get comfortable with that. So.
Excellent, excellent, Mike. Thank you very much for joining us. If anybody wants to contact you off of the webinar, what are good ways to reach you?
Well, Mike _Acton at Twitter, and macton@gmail.com is email. So knock yourself out.
Acton@gmail.com. Okay. So there it is. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Mike, for answering some questions. And this will be a recording made available through the IGDA at some point in time, hopefully pretty darn soon. So folks, we'll be doing another session, production leadership, for the 4th, is it 4th? Is this the 4th? It is the 4th, Wednesday next month. And they will be continuing on various other topics every Wednesday of the month, business development, design, all sorts of things. So thanks, everybody, for attending, and we hope to have you again soon. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Keith.